Maya Chen stood in the marble foyer of her father's sprawling estate, holding the foreclosure notice that would change everything. The same man who had spent 28 years telling her she'd never amount to anything, never own property, never be more than a failure, was about to lose his precious mansion to the bank. What her father didn't know was that Maya had just become the new owner of his mortgage, and the tables were about to turn in ways he never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain drummed against the windows of the cramped studio apartment as Maya stared at her laptop screen, the glow illuminating her exhausted face. It was 3 in the morning, and she had been coding for 16 hours straight, surviving on nothing but instant ramen and determination. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, debugging the financial software that would either make or break her startup company, FinanceFlow. At 28, she had already endured more rejection and humiliation than most people face in a lifetime, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she was on the verge of something that could change everything. The studio apartment in downtown Portland was a far cry from the mansion in Hillcrest where she had grown up. The walls were paper-thin, the heating barely worked, and the neighbors upstairs seemed to practice synchronized jumping at all hours. But it was hers. Every month, she scraped together the $700 for rent, and every month, she proved her father wrong just by surviving another 30 days in the world he had told her she could never navigate alone. Richard Chen had made his fortune in real estate development, transforming vacant lots into luxury shopping centers and office complexes throughout the Pacific Northwest. His success had afforded the family a lifestyle that most could only dream of. The mansion in Hillcrest boasted 8 bedrooms, a tennis court, and a view of the mountains that real estate agents described as priceless. But for Maya, that house had never felt like home. It had been a prison of expectations, a monument to her father's disappointment in the daughter who refused to follow his predetermined path. From the time she was old enough to understand money, Richard had mapped out Maya's future with the same precision he used to plan his developments. She would study business at Stanford, join his company as a junior executive, marry someone from an appropriate family, and eventually take over the Chen empire. The plan was flawless, except for one crucial element he had failed to consider. Maya had her own dreams, and they had nothing to do with real estate or living up to her father's version of success. The first crack in their relationship appeared when Maya was 16 and announced her intention to study computer science instead of business. Richard's reaction was swift and brutal. "You think you're going to make a living playing with computers? You're living in a fantasy, Maya. The real world doesn't care about your little programming games. Without my guidance, you'll end up living in some dump, struggling to pay rent like all the other dreamers who think they're special." The dismissal stung, but it also ignited something fierce within Maya. She threw herself into her studies, learning programming languages the way other teenagers learned pop songs. By her senior year of high school, she had already built 3 functional websites for local businesses and earned more money from freelance coding than her classmates made at their part-time jobs. But Richard remained unimpressed, viewing her technical skills as nothing more than an expensive hobby that would eventually need to be abandoned for serious work. College became a battlefield. Maya had earned a full scholarship to study computer science at Oregon State, but Richard refused to acknowledge her achievement. "You could have gone to Stanford for business," he said when she showed him the acceptance letter. "Instead, you're going to a state school to learn skills that will be obsolete in 5 years. Don't come crying to me when you realize you've wasted your potential." The comments became a constant refrain throughout her college years. Every phone call home included some variation of Richard's predictions for her inevitable failure. When she called to share news about her internship at a promising tech startup, he responded with skepticism about the company's long-term viability. When she excitedly described a programming competition she had won, he dismissed it as meaningless academic achievement that had no bearing on real-world success. When she mentioned her plans to start her own company after graduation, he laughed outright. "Maya, you have no business sense, no understanding of finance, and no experience managing people. Starting a company requires skills you simply don't possess. You'll burn through whatever money you've saved, accumulate debt you can't repay, and eventually come crawling back to ask for help. Save yourself the embarrassment and just apply to work for an established company. The night of her college graduation, the family gathered for dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. Maya's mother, Linda, had tried to maintain neutrality throughout the years of conflict, but her silence often felt like complicity. Her younger brother, David, had wisely chosen to study business as their father wished, and his compliance had earned him praise and financial support that Maya had never received. As they sat around the table, Richard raised his glass for a toast. "To Maya's graduation," he said, his voice carrying the tone of someone offering condolences rather than congratulations.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I hope this expensive education has at least taught you the value of practical decision-making. The real world is waiting, and it's much less forgiving than college professors. Maya forced a smile and sipped her wine, but inside, her resolve was hardening into something unbreakable. That night, she made a promise to herself that would guide every decision for the next 6 years. She would prove her father wrong, not just about her potential for success, but about his own understanding of what success actually meant. She would build something significant, something that mattered, and she would do it without his help, guidance, or approval. The first 2 years after graduation tested that resolve in ways she had never anticipated. Maya moved to Portland and rented the cheapest apartment she could find, a studio in a neighborhood that real estate listings generously described as up and coming. She worked days as a software developer for a mid-sized consulting firm, earning just enough to cover her basic expenses, and spent her evenings and weekends building the foundation for her own company. FinanceFlow had started as a simple idea. During her internships and early jobs, Maya had noticed that small business owners consistently struggled with financial management software that was either too expensive, too complicated, or designed for much larger companies. There had to be a middle ground, she reasoned, something that could provide sophisticated financial analysis and planning tools while remaining affordable and user-friendly for entrepreneurs and small business owners. The concept was solid, but turning it into a viable product required skills Maya was still developing and resources she didn't possess. She taught herself advanced database management, user interface design, and digital marketing through online courses and countless hours of trial and error. Her studio apartment became a cramped headquarters, with multiple monitors, external hard drives, and printed spreadsheets covering every available surface. The isolation was perhaps the most difficult aspect of those early years. Maya had never been particularly social, but the combination of her demanding day job and the constant pressure of building her company left little time for maintaining friendships. Her college friends had moved on to their own careers and relationships, and making new connections felt impossible when she was working 18-hour days. The loneliness was sometimes overwhelming, but it also provided clarity about what she was working toward. Success, she had come to understand, wasn't just about proving her father wrong anymore. It was about creating something meaningful that could help other people achieve their own dreams. Richard's criticism continued throughout this period, delivered through monthly phone calls that Maya dreaded but couldn't quite bring herself to avoid entirely. He had a talent for identifying and attacking her most vulnerable points, often with the precision of someone who had studied her weaknesses for years. "I ran into Tom Morrison at the country club," he said during one particularly painful conversation. "His daughter just bought a house in Lake Oswego. Beautiful place, 4 bedrooms, great investment potential. She's doing very well in pharmaceutical sales. I told him you were still working on your computer project. He seemed confused about why you haven't moved on to something more substantial yet." The implication was clear. Maya's peers were achieving traditional markers of success, buying houses, advancing in established careers, while she remained stuck in what her father viewed as an extended adolescence. The criticism was especially painful because it touched on her own insecurities about the path she had chosen. Some days, usually when debugging particularly frustrating code or facing another rejection from a potential investor, she wondered if Richard might be right.
Maybe she was being naive about her chances of success. Maybe she was wasting her potential on a dream that would never materialize into anything meaningful. But then she would remember the small business owners she had interviewed during her market research, entrepreneurs who were passionate about their work but frustrated by financial management tools that felt designed to confuse rather than clarify. She thought about the coffee shop owner who spent 3 hours every week trying to understand his cash flow projections, or the freelance graphic designer who had given up on financial planning entirely because existing software was too expensive and complicated for her needs. These were the people FinanceFlow could help, and helping them felt more important than proving anything to her father. The breakthrough came during Maya's 4th year of development when she finally created a prototype that satisfied her standards for functionality and user experience. FinanceFlow could import data from multiple sources, generate customizable reports, and provide predictive analysis that would typically require expensive consultants or sophisticated accounting software. More importantly, it was designed to be intuitive enough that users could master its basic functions within their first hour of use. Maya spent 6 months testing the prototype with a small group of local business owners, refining features based on their feedback, and gradually building confidence that she had created something genuinely useful. The positive responses were encouraging, but she knew that transforming a functional prototype into a commercially viable product would require significantly more resources than she could provide alone. She needed investors, marketing support, and a team of developers who could help her scale the platform for broader distribution. The process of seeking investment proved to be as challenging as building the software itself, but in entirely different ways. Maya had spent years developing technical skills, but she was largely unprepared for the world of venture capital, with its emphasis on networking, presentation, and the kind of confident salesmanship that had never come naturally to her. She attended pitch events where entrepreneurs delivered polished presentations to rooms full of potential investors, and she felt intimidated by their apparent comfort with self-promotion. Her first formal pitch meeting was a disaster. Maya had prepared extensively, practicing her presentation until she could deliver it from memory. But when faced with a conference room full of suited investors, she became nervous and rushed through her material too quickly. The questions that followed exposed gaps in her business plan that she hadn't considered, particularly around marketing strategy and competitive analysis. The feedback was polite but devastating.
Interesting concept, but we'd like to see more evidence of market demand and a clearer path to profitability. Maya walked back to her car in the parking garage, sat behind the wheel, and cried for the first time in months. The rejection felt like confirmation of every criticism her father had ever made about her lack of business acumen and her naive understanding of how successful companies were built. That evening, she seriously considered abandoning the project entirely and looking for a stable job at an established company. But something happened over the next few days that changed her perspective. 2 of the business owners who had tested her prototype called to ask when the full version would be available. They had been using competing software in the meantime and were eager to switch to FinanceFlow because of its superior functionality and user-friendly design. Their enthusiasm reminded Maya that her primary goal wasn't to impress investors or prove her father wrong, but to create something valuable for people who actually needed it. She spent the next month revising her business plan and improving her pitch presentation. But more importantly, she shifted her focus from seeking large-scale investment to building a customer base that could sustain the company's growth organically. Maya launched a beta version of FinanceFlow with a small monthly subscription fee, targeting the same small business owners who had helped her test the prototype. The initial response was modest but encouraging. Within 3 months, she had 47 paying customers and a waiting list of business owners who wanted access to the full platform. The success was intoxicating in ways Maya hadn't anticipated. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like she was building something that mattered, creating value that people were willing to pay for. The revenue was still modest, barely enough to cover her basic living expenses, but it represented proof that her father's predictions had been wrong.
She wasn't destined for failure. She wasn't naive about the real world. She was actually succeeding, slowly and carefully, in exactly the way she had always believed was possible. Richard's response to news of her early success was characteristically dismissive. 47 customers? Maya, that's barely a hobby, not a business. Real companies have thousands of customers, millions in revenue. You're playing in the kiddie pool and pretending you're swimming in the ocean. Don't mistake small-scale success for actual achievement. But Maya no longer felt devastated by his criticism. The money in her business account, modest as it was, represented something more valuable than her father's approval. It was evidence that she had been right to trust her instincts, right to pursue her own vision of success, right to ignore the predictions of inevitable failure that had shadowed her for so many years. As FinanceFlow's customer base grew throughout her 5th year of development, Maya began to encounter a new set of challenges related to scaling a business. The software that had worked perfectly for dozens of users began to show strain when hundreds of people were accessing it simultaneously. Customer service inquiries increased exponentially, and Maya found herself spending more time troubleshooting technical problems than developing new features. She was successful enough to need help, but not yet profitable enough to hire a full team of employees. The solution came from an unexpected source. Jake Martinez, a software engineer she had met at a tech meetup 2 years earlier, reached out to express interest in joining the company as a co-founder. He had been following FinanceFlow's progress and believed that his experience with enterprise software development could help Maya overcome the technical challenges that were limiting her growth. More importantly, he shared her vision of creating tools that would democratize financial management for small business owners. Maya's initial reaction was skeptical. She had spent 6 years building FinanceFlow alone, learning to trust her own judgment and resist outside pressure to change direction. The idea of sharing control of her company, even with someone whose technical skills could accelerate its growth, felt like abandoning the independence that had become central to her identity. But Jake's proposal was thoughtful and respectful of the work she had already done. He wasn't asking to take over the company or redirect its focus. He wanted to help her achieve her existing goals more effectively. After weeks of careful consideration and extensive discussions about vision and values, Maya agreed to bring Jake on as a co-founder and chief technical officer. His arrival transformed FinanceFlow's development process and allowed Maya to focus on the business strategy and customer relationships that had always been her strengths. Within 6 months of their partnership, the platform was supporting over 300 customers and generating enough revenue to cover both of their salaries, modest as they were. The partnership with Jake also provided Maya with something she hadn't realized she had been missing: a colleague who understood both the technical challenges of software development and the emotional investment she had made in the company's success. Jake had founded his own startup several years earlier, and while it had ultimately failed to achieve sustainable profitability, the experience had given him insights into entrepreneurship that proved invaluable for navigating FinanceFlow's growth. More importantly, Jake believed in the mission that drove Maya's work. He had grown up in a family of small business owners and had witnessed firsthand the struggles that entrepreneurs faced when trying to understand their financial position and plan for the future. His parents had owned a small restaurant that failed partly because they lacked access to the kind of financial analysis tools that larger businesses took for granted. FinanceFlow represented more than a business opportunity to Jake. It was a chance to solve problems that had affected his own family and countless others like them. As Maya entered her 6th year of working on FinanceFlow, now with Jake as her partner and co-founder, she began to feel confident that the company was approaching the kind of stability and success that would finally silence her father's criticism. The platform was supporting over 500 customers across 12 states, generating consistent monthly revenue that allowed both founders to earn modest but livable salaries. Industry publications had begun to notice FinanceFlow, featuring it in articles about innovative financial software and emerging companies to watch. But Maya's newfound confidence was about to be tested in ways she never could have anticipated. The same market forces that were driving growth for FinanceFlow were also creating challenges for other businesses, including some that were much closer to home than she realized. The real estate market that had made her father wealthy was beginning to show signs of instability, and the over-leveraged investments that had funded his lifestyle were becoming increasingly difficult to manage.
Maya first learned about her family's financial difficulties through an unexpected phone call from her mother. Linda had never called her daughter to discuss money before, leaving those conversations to Richard, but her voice carried an anxiety that immediately put Maya on alert. "Your father doesn't know I'm calling," Linda said without preamble, "but I thought you should know that we might be facing some challenges with the house. There are some complications with the mortgages, and Richard is trying to work things out with the bank. I don't understand all the details, but I thought you should be prepared in case things don't go well." Maya asked for more information, but Linda's understanding of their financial situation was limited. Richard had always handled their money, making decisions unilaterally and sharing details only when absolutely necessary. What Linda knew was that they had borrowed against the house several times to fund Richard's various development projects, and the current value of their property was apparently insufficient to cover the total amount they owed. The conversation left Maya with more questions than answers, but it also sparked a curiosity that she couldn't ignore. Her father had spent years lecturing her about financial responsibility and business acumen, yet it seemed that his own financial management might be seriously flawed. Maya began to research the public records related to her family's property, discovering that the situation was even more complicated than her mother had suggested. The Hillcrest mansion that Maya had grown up in, the symbol of her father's success and the backdrop for countless lectures about her own inadequacy, was encumbered by 3 separate mortgages totaling nearly $2 million. The property's current market value, based on recent sales of comparable homes, appeared to be significantly less than the total debt secured by it. Richard wasn't just facing financial difficulties, he was facing the possibility of losing everything he had built his identity around. Maya's initial reaction was a complex mixture of vindication and concern. Part of her felt satisfied that the man who had predicted her financial failure was apparently facing his own economic crisis. But she also felt genuine worry about her parents' future and confusion about how someone with Richard's experience and expertise could have made such seemingly poor decisions. The answer began to emerge as Maya continued her research into her father's business activities. Richard's development company had been expanding aggressively over the past 5 years, taking on increasingly ambitious projects that required substantial upfront investment. Rather than seeking external investors or partners, he had chosen to fund these ventures by borrowing against his personal assets, including the family home. The strategy had worked well initially, generating significant profits that allowed him to take on even larger projects. But the real estate market that had fueled Richard's success was beginning to shift in ways that exposed the risks he had been taking. Several of his recent projects had encountered unexpected delays and cost overruns, while demand for commercial real estate was softening throughout the region. The combination of reduced income from his development work and the substantial debt service on his various loans was creating a cash flow crisis that threatened everything he owned. Maya found herself in the strange position of understanding her father's financial situation better than he might have expected, and certainly better than he would have been comfortable with if he had known about her research. FinanceFlow's focus on financial analysis and cash flow management had given her insights into business finance that she had never possessed during their earlier conflicts about her career choices. She could see, with uncomfortable clarity, exactly how Richard's decision-making had led to his current crisis. The irony wasn't lost on her. The daughter who had been lectured for years about her lack of business sense was now in a position to understand and potentially solve the financial problems that threatened to destroy her father's empire. Maya had spent 6 years building a company based on the principle that effective financial management required clear analysis and careful planning, exactly the kind of discipline that appeared to be missing from Richard's approach to his own business. As autumn turned to winter, Maya continued to monitor her family's situation while focusing on FinanceFlow's continued growth. The company was approaching a significant milestone, 1,000 active customers, and monthly revenue that would finally allow her and Jake to reinvest substantially in product development and marketing. She had also been approached by several potential investors who were interested in providing capital to accelerate the company's expansion. But Maya's attention was increasingly divided between her business success and her family's mounting crisis. Linda called more frequently, usually when Richard was away from the house, to share updates about their situation.
The bank had begun foreclosure proceedings on the primary mortgage, and Richard's attempts to restructure his debts had been unsuccessful. Unless he could generate significant cash within the next few months, they would lose the house that had been the foundation of their family's identity for over 20 years. Maya faced a decision that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. She had the resources, through her business success and the investment opportunities that were becoming available to her, to potentially help her parents avoid foreclosure. But doing so would mean using the financial independence she had worked so hard to achieve to bail out the man who had spent decades predicting her failure and dismissing her dreams. The decision was complicated by her evolving understanding of her relationship with Richard. Maya had spent years thinking of their conflict in terms of his inability to believe in her potential, but her research into his financial crisis had revealed something more complex. Richard's criticism and predictions of failure weren't just expressions of disappointment in her choices, they were projections of his own fears and insecurity about success and stability. The man who had lectured her about financial responsibility was taking enormous risks with his family's security, and his harsh judgments of her career choices might have been attempts to convince himself that his own approach was superior. Maya realized that she had a choice that went beyond simply helping or not helping her parents avoid foreclosure.
She could use her success and financial understanding to fundamentally change the dynamic that had defined their relationship for so many years. Instead of being the daughter who needed rescue from her poor decisions, she could become the person with the power to rescue her father from his. The opportunity to purchase her father's mortgage came through Jake's connections in the financial industry. One of his former colleagues worked for the bank that held the primary loan on the Hillcrest property, and during a casual conversation about real estate investments, he mentioned that the bank was considering selling some of their distressed mortgages to private investors, rather than completing the foreclosure process. Maya's initial inquiry about the possibility was hypothetical, more an exploration of her options than a firm intention to act. But as she learned more about the process and the potential terms, she began to see it as the perfect solution to multiple problems. Purchasing her father's mortgage would allow her to prevent the foreclosure while also putting her in a position of unprecedented power in their relationship. For the first time in her life, she would be the one with control over her father's future. The irony was delicious and terrifying in equal measure. Maya had spent 28 years listening to predictions that she would never own property, never achieve financial stability, never understand how the real world actually worked. Now, she was in a position to own the mortgage on her father's mansion, to become his landlord and creditor, to hold his financial future in her hands. The decision required careful consideration of both the financial implications and the emotional consequences. Purchasing her father's mortgage would require a significant portion of Maya's business capital and the investment funds that she had been planning to use for FinanceFlow's expansion. It would also fundamentally alter her relationship with her family in ways that might be difficult to manage or reverse. But it would also represent the ultimate validation of everything she had worked toward for the past 6 years. Maya wouldn't just be proving that her father's predictions were wrong. She would be demonstrating that her understanding of finance and business was superior to his. She would be rescuing him from the consequences of exactly the kind of poor decision-making that he had always claimed she was prone to. As winter deepened and the foreclosure deadline approached, Maya made her decision. She would purchase her father's mortgage, but she wouldn't tell him about it until after the transaction was complete. Richard Chen, the man who had spent decades telling his daughter she would never amount to anything, was about to discover that she owned his house. The process of purchasing her father's mortgage proved to be more complex than Maya had initially anticipated, requiring weeks of negotiations with the bank's asset management division and careful coordination with her business attorney. The bank was eager to offload the distressed loan rather than continue with the lengthy and expensive foreclosure process. But they needed assurance that Maya had both the financial capacity to honor the purchase agreement and a legitimate plan for managing the property. Maya's business success with FinanceFlow provided the necessary credentials for the transaction, but she chose to structure the purchase through a newly created investment company rather than making the acquisition in her personal name. The additional layer of corporate protection would provide privacy during the initial phase of ownership and give her more options for how to reveal the situation to her family when the time came. The final purchase price was significantly less than the original loan balance, reflecting both the property's declined value and the bank's desire to avoid further losses. Maya acquired a mortgage with an outstanding balance of $1.8 million for just over $1 million, instantly creating equity that made the investment financially sound, even without considering the emotional satisfaction it would provide. Throughout the acquisition process, Maya maintained her regular communication with her mother while carefully avoiding any mention of her plans. Linda's calls had become increasingly frequent and desperate as the foreclosure deadline approached. Richard had exhausted his options for restructuring the debt and was facing the reality that they would need to vacate the house within 60 days unless some miracle intervened. The irony of Maya being that miracle wasn't lost on her, but she was determined to control the timing and manner of the revelation. Richard had spent years delivering harsh truths about her prospects and capabilities, often with timing calculated for maximum impact. Maya wanted her response to carry similar weight, to arrive at the moment when it would be most meaningful and transformative for their relationship. Jake proved to be an invaluable partner in navigating both the mortgage acquisition and the continued growth of FinanceFlow during this period. His technical expertise allowed Maya to focus on the legal and financial complexities of her investment while ensuring that their business continued to expand and serve its growing customer base. More importantly, Jake understood the emotional significance of what Maya was attempting to and provided both practical support and thoughtful perspective when the stress of managing multiple complex situations threatened to overwhelm her. The mortgage purchase was completed on a Friday afternoon in late February, 3 weeks before the foreclosure was scheduled to proceed. Maya signed the final documents in her attorney's conference room, officially becoming the holder of her father's debt and the person with ultimate control over his ability to remain in the family home. The moment was simultaneously triumphant and terrifying, representing both the achievement of something she had never imagined possible and the beginning of a confrontation that would forever alter her relationship with her father. Maya spent the weekend after the closing considering her options for revealing the situation to her family. She could approach her parents directly, appearing at their door with the mortgage documents and enjoying their shock at discovering her new position in their lives. She could call her father and arrange a formal meeting, perhaps in his office, where the business nature of their new relationship would be immediately apparent. She could even wait for the next mortgage statement to arrive, allowing Richard to discover the change in ownership through the impersonal bureaucracy of monthly billing. Each approach had its appeal and its risks. Maya wanted to ensure that her revelation would have maximum impact, but she also needed to consider the long-term consequences of how she chose to wield her new power. The goal wasn't simply revenge, though the opportunity for payback after years of criticism and dismissal was undeniably satisfying. Maya wanted to fundamentally change the dynamic between herself and her father, to establish a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than his condescension and her defensiveness. The decision about timing was made for her when Linda called on Sunday evening with news that Richard had scheduled a meeting with bankruptcy attorneys for the following week. The foreclosure process had progressed to the point where they were preparing to surrender the house and declare personal bankruptcy rather than continue fighting a battle they couldn't win. Linda's voice carried a defeated quality that Maya had never heard before, a recognition that the life they had built was about to disappear entirely.
More importantly, the emotional toll on both of her parents was becoming increasingly evident, and Maya found that her desire for dramatic revelation was being tempered by genuine concern for their well-being. She decided to act immediately, but in a way that would give her maximum control over the conversation and its outcome. Rather than surprising her parents with an unexpected visit or phone call, Maya sent her father a formal business letter requesting a meeting to discuss a financial matter related to his property. The letter was printed on FinanceFlow letterhead and signed in her capacity as Chief Executive Officer, establishing from the outset that this would be a business discussion between equals rather than a family conversation between parent and child. The letter arrived at the Hillcrest house on Tuesday morning, and Richard called Maya within hours of receiving it. His voice carried a mixture of confusion and irritation that was familiar from their previous conversations, but also a new note of desperation that reflected his deteriorating situation. Maya, what is this letter about? You said you wanted to discuss a financial matter related to my property, but you didn't provide any details. If this is some kind of sales pitch for your software company, now is not the time. Your mother and I are dealing with serious issues that require our full attention. Maya had prepared for this call and was ready with a response that would intrigue him without revealing too much information. Dad, I understand that you're facing some challenges with the house. I believe I may have a solution that could be beneficial for everyone involved. I'd prefer to discuss the details in person if you're available to meet later this week. The suggestion that Maya might have a solution to his problems was clearly unexpected, and Richard's response revealed both skepticism and curiosity. What kind of solution? Maya, I appreciate that you want to help, but this situation is beyond the scope of your experience. We're dealing with sophisticated financial instruments and legal obligations that require expertise you don't possess. Even in his moment of crisis, Richard couldn't resist lecturing his daughter about her limitations. But Maya detected something different in his tone, a subtle acknowledgement that he was running out of options and might need to consider alternatives he would normally dismiss. She pressed her advantage carefully, maintaining a professional demeanor while offering just enough information to secure the meeting she needed. I understand the complexity of the situation, Dad. That's exactly why I think we should meet to discuss the specifics. I have some information that might change your perspective on the available options. Would Thursday afternoon work for you? I could come to your office, or we could meet somewhere neutral if you prefer. Richard agreed to meet at his office on Thursday at 2 o'clock, though he continued to express skepticism about Maya's ability to contribute meaningfully to solving his problems. The call ended with his familiar refrain about her inexperience with serious financial matters, but Maya detected an undertone of hope that hadn't been present in their previous conversations. Desperation, she realized, was a powerful motivator for considering previously unthinkable possibilities. Maya spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing for what would likely be the most important conversation of her life. She reviewed all of the documentation related to the mortgage purchase, consulted with her attorney about the legal implications of her various options, and developed multiple scenarios for how the discussion might unfold. Most importantly, she worked with Jake to ensure that FinanceFlow's operations wouldn't be affected by whatever personal drama might result from her revelation. The meeting location itself carried symbolic significance that Maya appreciated. Richard's office was located in a downtown high-rise that he had developed early in his career, a testament to his success in transforming vacant urban spaces into profitable commercial properties. Maya had visited the office many times throughout her childhood and teenage years, usually for brief encounters that reinforced her father's importance and her own peripheral role in his professional world. Now she would be returning as an equal, or perhaps even as his superior in the specific matter they were meeting to discuss. The role reversal was both satisfying and nerve-wracking, representing a fundamental shift in their relationship that neither of them had anticipated when she first announced her intention to study computer science more than a decade earlier. Maya arrived at the office building 15 minutes early and spent the time in the lobby reviewing her talking points and managing her nerves. She had chosen her outfit carefully, wearing a navy blue business suit that projected professionalism and authority. The briefcase she carried contained copies of all the relevant documents, organized and tabbed for easy reference during their discussion. She wanted to appear prepared and competent, someone capable of handling complex financial negotiations rather than the inexperienced dreamer that Richard had always seen her as. Richard's assistant showed Maya into the familiar conference room where she had occasionally waited during childhood visits to her father's office. The space was designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and a polished mahogany table that could seat 12 people comfortably. Maya took a seat facing the windows, positioning herself so that Richard would need to look toward the light when addressing her. Richard entered the room exactly on time, carrying a thick file folder and wearing the expression of barely controlled stress that had become characteristic during his recent financial troubles. He took a seat across from Maya and opened his folder, revealing documents that she recognized as mortgage statements, legal notices, and correspondence with his attorneys. "All right, Maya," he began without preamble. "I appreciate that you want to help, but I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation before we waste time discussing solutions that aren't realistic. Your mother and I are facing foreclosure on our home. We owe nearly $2 million secured by property that may not be worth even half of that amount.
The bank has rejected every proposal we've made for restructuring the debt, and my attorneys believe that bankruptcy may be our only option for protecting our remaining assets. Maya listened without interruption, noting the exhaustion in her father's voice and the way his shoulders sagged with the weight of his financial burden.
This was a man who had spent decades projecting confidence and control, who had built his identity around his ability to navigate complex business challenges successfully. Seeing him so obviously overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control was both satisfying and heartbreaking. When Richard finished his summary of the situation, Maya opened her briefcase and withdrew the first document she had prepared for this moment. It was a simple one-page summary of FinanceFlow's growth and financial performance over the past year, including revenue figures, customer counts, and profitability projections. She slid the paper across the table without comment, watching as her father's expression shifted from confusion to surprise as he absorbed the information. "Maya, these numbers, are they accurate? Your company generated over $800,000 in revenue last year? $873,000 to be exact. We're on track to exceed $1.2 million this year, and we're currently profitable with strong cash flow. Jake and I have also been approached by several investors who are interested in providing capital for expansion." Richard studied the document more carefully, his businessman's instincts clearly engaged despite his personal stress. Maya could see him processing the implications of her success, trying to reconcile this evidence of her business acumen with his long-held assumptions about her capabilities and prospects. "I had no idea your little computer project had become so substantial," he said finally, his choice of words still carrying a note of dismissal, even as he acknowledged her achievement. "But I'm not sure how this relates to our situation. Are you offering to lend us money? Because even if you could spare a few $100,000, it wouldn't be enough to solve our problems." Maya smiled, recognizing the opening she had been waiting for. She reached into her briefcase again and withdrew the mortgage assignment documents that officially transferred ownership of Richard's debt from the bank to her investment company. She placed the papers on the table between them, positioning them so that Richard could easily read the cover page with its official stamps and legal language. "Actually, Dad, I'm not offering to lend your money. I don't need to, because I already own your mortgage." The silence that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced with her father. Richard stared at the documents without moving, his face cycling through expressions of confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning comprehension. She could see the moment when the implications of her statement fully registered, when he understood that his daughter, the person he had spent years dismissing as naive and incompetent, had somehow acquired the power to determine his family's future. "This is impossible," Richard said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "These documents, they can't be legitimate. You don't have the resources to purchase a mortgage of this size, and banks don't sell distressed loans to individuals without extensive financial backing." Maya had anticipated this reaction and was prepared with supporting documentation. She withdrew additional papers from her briefcase, including bank confirmation letters, title insurance policies, and her attorney's certification of the transaction's completion. Each document reinforced the reality that Richard was struggling to accept. His daughter had not only achieved significant business success, but had used that success to gain control over the debt that threatened to destroy his life. "The purchase was completed through my investment company last month," Maya explained, maintaining the calm, professional tone she had practiced for this moment. "The bank was motivated to sell because foreclosure proceedings are expensive and time-consuming. I was able to acquire the mortgage at a significant discount, which makes it a sound investment even without considering the personal implications." Richard continued to examine the documents, searching for some flaw or misunderstanding that would invalidate what he was seeing. But Maya's attorney had been thorough in preparing the paperwork, and every detail confirmed the legitimacy of her acquisition. After several minutes of silent review, Richard looked up at his daughter with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of shock, respect, and something that might have been fear. "Maya, I don't understand how you accomplished this, but I need to know what your intentions are. Are you planning to foreclose? Do you want us to vacate the house? What are your terms for allowing us to remain?" The questions revealed both Richard's desperation and his acknowledgement that Maya now held all the power in their relationship.
For the first time in her adult life, her father was asking for her guidance and approval rather than lecturing her about her limitations. The reversal was everything she had imagined it would be, but it was also more complicated emotionally than she had anticipated. Maya had spent weeks considering her options for how to handle this moment, weighing her desire for vindication against her genuine concern for her parents' welfare. She had the legal right to demand immediate repayment of the full mortgage balance, which would force her parents into bankruptcy and likely result in their losing everything. She could also maintain the existing payment schedule, but impose new terms and conditions that would give her ongoing control over their living situation. But as she looked at her father's defeated expression and considered the fear and uncertainty that her parents had been living with for months, Maya realized that simple revenge would be less satisfying than she had expected. What she wanted wasn't to destroy Richard, but to fundamentally change their relationship in a way that would benefit both of them long term. "Dad," she said, choosing her words carefully, "I didn't purchase your mortgage to punish you or force you from your home. I did it because I saw an opportunity to solve your problem while also making a sound investment. But I think we need to have a broader conversation about our relationship and how we move forward from here."
Richard nodded, his relief at not facing immediate eviction clearly visible. But Maya could see that he was still processing the magnitude of the situation, still struggling to accept that his daughter had not only achieved the kind of success he had always claimed was impossible for her, but had used that success to rescue him from the consequences of his own poor decisions. "I owe you an apology," Richard said, his voice carrying a sincerity that Maya had rarely heard from him. "I was wrong about your potential, wrong about your business, wrong about your ability to understand finance and make smart decisions. This mortgage purchase, it demonstrates exactly the kind of strategic thinking and risk assessment that I thought you lacked." The apology was more than Maya had dared to hope for, but she sensed that it was only the beginning of a much longer conversation about their past conflicts and future relationship. Richard's acknowledgement of his mistakes was important, but it didn't erase years of criticism and dismissal that had shaped Maya's understanding of herself and her capabilities. "I appreciate the apology, Dad, but I think we need to discuss why you were so convinced that I would fail. It wasn't just that you disagreed with my career choices, you seemed to genuinely believe that I lacked the intelligence and judgment to succeed at anything meaningful. Where did that assessment come from?" The question clearly made Richard uncomfortable, forcing him to examine assumptions and prejudices that he had probably never consciously acknowledged. Maya could see him struggling with how to respond, caught between his desire to repair their relationship and his reluctance to admit the depth of his misunderstanding of her character and abilities. "I suppose," Richard said slowly, "I was projecting my own fears and insecurities onto your situation. Building my business required taking enormous risks, and I succeeded partly through luck and timing that I couldn't control. When I saw you choosing a path that seemed risky and uncertain, I worried that you would experience the failures that I had always feared for myself." The admission was more honest than Maya had expected, revealing a vulnerability in her father that she had never previously seen. Richard had built his identity around his business success, but that success had apparently come with constant anxiety about its sustainability. His criticism of Maya's choices might have been less about her capabilities and more about his own terror of failure and financial insecurity. "But Dad," Maya continued, "your fears about my choices led you to make statements that were incredibly hurtful and damaging. You didn't just express concern about my career path. You told me repeatedly that I would never own property, never achieve financial stability, never understand how business really works. Those predictions weren't based on careful analysis of my abilities. They were based on your assumption that I was destined to fail." Richard's discomfort was clearly increasing, as Maya forced him to confront the specific ways that his behavior had affected her. She could see that he was recognizing, perhaps for the first time, how his words had been experienced by their target. The realization appeared to be genuinely painful for him, as if he was discovering that he had unknowingly inflicted serious harm on someone he loved. "Maya, I never intended to hurt you. I thought I was preparing you for the realities of adult life, helping you understand the challenges you would face. But I can see now that my approach was wrong, that I discouraged you when I should have been supporting your efforts to build something meaningful."
The conversation continued for over 2 hours, covering topics that Maya and Richard had never discussed openly before. Richard shared details about his own early business failures, the near bankruptcies that had taught him to fear financial insecurity, and the pressure he had felt to project confidence, even when privately doubting his own decisions. Maya described the isolation and self-doubt that his criticism had created, the way his predictions of failure had haunted her, even as she worked to prove them wrong. By the end of the meeting, both of them had a better understanding of how their relationship had become so damaged and what would be required to repair it. Richard's acknowledgement of his mistakes was genuine, but Maya recognized that rebuilding trust would require consistent demonstration of his changed attitude, rather than simply apologetic words. The practical arrangements for the mortgage were almost anticlimactic after the emotional intensity of their broader discussion. Maya proposed restructuring the loan with reduced monthly payments that Richard could afford based on his current income, extending the repayment period to make the debt manageable while still providing her with a reasonable return on her investment. The new terms would allow her parents to remain in their home while gradually rebuilding their financial stability. More importantly, Maya established that any future business decisions affecting the mortgage would be made collaboratively, with both of them contributing their expertise to ensure the best possible outcome. Richard's experience with real estate and business development could be valuable for Maya's investment activities, while her analytical skills and technological expertise could help him avoid the mistakes that had led to his current crisis. As they shook hands at the conclusion of their meeting, Maya felt a complex mixture of satisfaction, relief, and cautious optimism. She had achieved something that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Not only had she proven her father wrong about her potential, but she had done so in a way that positioned her to help him recover from his own failures. The drive back to her apartment gave Maya time to process the emotional magnitude of what had just occurred. Her relationship with her father would never be the same, but for the first time since her teenage years, she felt hopeful that it might become something positive and mutually supportive. Richard's acknowledgement of his mistakes was an important first step, but Maya knew that the real test would come in how he treated her going forward, whether he could consistently recognize her as an equal rather than reverting to his old patterns of condescension and dismissal. That evening, Maya called her mother to share the news of her meeting with Richard, though she was careful to let Linda draw her own conclusions about the implications rather than explicitly what had transpired. Linda's relief was immediately apparent, and Maya could hear tears in her voice as she processed the information that they wouldn't be losing their home after all. "Your father called to tell me that you had found a solution to our problems," Linda said, her voice shaking with emotion. "He said you had become quite successful with your business and were able to help us restructure our debt. I always believed in you, Maya, even when things seemed difficult between you and your father." Maya wasn't entirely convinced that her mother had always believed in her success, but she appreciated Linda's attempt to position herself as supportive during the years of conflict.
More importantly, she could hear genuine gratitude and love in her mother's voice, emotions that had often been overshadowed by the tension between Maya and Richard. The conversation with Linda was shorter and less emotionally intense than the meeting with Richard had been, but it reinforced Maya's sense that her acquisition of the mortgage had created an opportunity for healing relationships that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding and resentment. Her mother's relief and gratitude were genuine, and Maya felt confident that their relationship could be repaired more easily than her connection with Richard. As Maya settled into bed that night, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed over the past few years. 6 years earlier, she had been a recent college graduate living in a cramped apartment, working at an entry-level job, and spending her evenings building software that her father dismissed as a hobby. Now she was a successful entrepreneur who had achieved financial independence and used that success to rescue her parents from bankruptcy. But more than the material changes, Maya was struck by the transformation in how she understood herself and her capabilities. Richard's years of criticism had convinced her that she was naive, impractical, and destined for failure. The process of building FinanceFlow and achieving genuine business success had proven those predictions wrong. But purchasing her father's mortgage had demonstrated something even more significant. She had developed exactly the kind of strategic thinking and financial acumen that Richard had always claimed she lacked. The next few months would test whether the changes in her relationship with her father could be sustained, whether Richard could consistently treat her as an equal and valuable partner rather than reverting to his old patterns of condescension. But Maya felt confident that she was prepared for whatever challenges might arise. She had proven to herself that she could succeed in the business world, and she had used that success to fundamentally alter the dynamics that had defined her family relationships for most of her adult life. Most importantly, Maya had discovered that the best revenge against those who doubt your potential isn't simply proving them wrong, but using your success to create positive outcomes for everyone involved. Purchasing her father's mortgage had given her the ultimate vindication, but structuring the transaction as a solution rather than a punishment had preserved the possibility of rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and collaboration. The transformation in Richard's behavior didn't happen overnight, but Maya noticed subtle changes in their interactions within the first month after their confrontation. His phone calls, which had previously consisted largely of unsolicited advice about her career and financial decisions, shifted to genuine inquiries about FinanceFlow's progress and thoughtful questions about her expansion plans. When she mentioned challenges with scaling their customer support operations, Richard offered to review their service workflows and suggested improvements based on his experience managing customer relationships in the construction industry. More significantly, Richard began asking Maya for her perspective on his own business decisions. The real estate market remained challenging, and several of his ongoing projects required careful financial management to remain profitable. Rather than making unilateral decisions as he had done in the past, Richard started consulting with Maya about cash flow projections, risk assessment, and strategic planning. Their weekly coffee meetings became collaborative sessions where both of them contributed expertise to solve complex problems. Maya found these interactions surprisingly satisfying, not just because they represented acknowledgement of her capabilities, but because they allowed her to see aspects of her father's intelligence and experience that had been obscured by years of conflict. Richard's understanding of market dynamics, negotiation strategies, and project management was genuinely impressive, and Maya began to appreciate why he had achieved significant success despite the financial crisis that had nearly destroyed him. The collaboration also revealed complementary strengths that neither of them had previously recognized. Richard's intuitive grasp of human psychology made him excellent at anticipating client needs and managing stakeholder relationships, while Maya's analytical approach and systematic thinking helped identify potential problems before they became critical. Their different perspectives, which had once been a source of constant friction, proved to be valuable assets when applied to solving business challenges together. FinanceFlow continued to grow throughout the spring and summer following Maya's mortgage purchase, reaching 1,500 active customers and generating monthly revenue that exceeded her most optimistic projections from just 2 years earlier. The success attracted attention from larger competitors, and Maya received several acquisition offers that would have provided substantial immediate returns on her investment. But she also recognized opportunities to expand the company's capabilities and market reach that could create even greater long-term value. Jake proved instrumental in navigating these strategic decisions, bringing both technical expertise and entrepreneurial perspective that helped Maya evaluate her options objectively. His experience with startup growth cycles and investor relationships complemented her deep understanding of their customer base and market positioning. Together, they developed a 5-year plan that balanced aggressive expansion with financial stability, ensuring that FinanceFlow could capitalize on emerging opportunities without jeopardizing its core operations. The plan required significant additional investment, both for product development and marketing initiatives that would establish FinanceFlow as a major player in the business software market. Maya and Jake had saved enough capital to fund modest growth, but achieving their ambitious goals would require external investors or strategic partnerships that could provide resources beyond their current capabilities. Rather than approaching traditional venture capital firms, Maya decided to explore alternative funding sources that would allow her to maintain greater control over the company's direction and values. Richard's experience with project financing and business partnerships proved invaluable during this process, as he helped Maya understand complex investment structures and negotiate terms that protected her interests while providing investors with reasonable returns. One of Richard's contacts in the regional business community introduced Maya to a group of successful entrepreneurs who had formed an informal investment network focused on supporting promising local companies. Unlike traditional venture capital firms, these investors were primarily interested in helping businesses achieve sustainable growth rather than maximizing short-term returns.
Their approach aligned perfectly with Maya's vision for FinanceFlow's development. The investment discussions revealed another opportunity for Maya and Richard to collaborate productively. Richard's reputation and connections in the business community provided credibility that enhanced Maya's presentations, while her detailed financial projections and market analysis impressed investors who might have been skeptical about backing a relatively young entrepreneur. Their combined expertise created a compelling case for finance's potential that neither of them could have made independently. After 3 months of negotiations, Maya secured a $2 million investment that valued FinanceFlow at $12 million, providing the capital needed for aggressive expansion while allowing her to retain majority ownership and operational control. The investors also brought valuable expertise in scaling technology companies and expanding into new geographic markets, relationships that would accelerate FinanceFlow's growth beyond what Maya could have achieved through organic development alone. The successful fundraising marked a pivotal moment in Maya's relationship with her father, demonstrating conclusively that his earlier predictions about her business acumen had been wrong. But more importantly, it showed that their collaboration could create value that exceeded what either of them could have accomplished alone. Richard's acknowledgement of this reality represented a fundamental shift in how he understood both Maya's capabilities and his own role in supporting her success. During the investment celebration dinner, Richard made a toast that summarized the transformation in their relationship better than any formal apology could have done. To Maya, he said, raising his glass with genuine pride, who taught me that the most dangerous mistake a parent can make is underestimating their child's potential. Your success with FinanceFlow isn't just a business achievement, it's proof that vision and determination can overcome any obstacle, including the doubts of people who should have known better.
The acknowledgement was everything Maya had wanted to hear during the years when Richard's criticism had undermined her confidence and fueled her determination to prove him wrong. But receiving that validation now, when she no longer needed it for her own emotional well-being, allowed her to appreciate it as a genuine expression of love and respect, rather than simply the vindication she had once craved. Maya's relationship with her mother also continued to improve as the family dynamics shifted from conflict to collaboration. Linda had always been caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her daughter, forced to navigate the tension between Richard's dismissiveness and Maya's determination to succeed on her own terms. With that conflict resolved, Linda could express her pride in Maya's achievements without worrying about taking sides in an ongoing battle. More importantly, Linda began to share perspectives about the family's financial crisis that helped Maya understand her parents' situation more completely. Richard's reluctance to discuss their difficulties hadn't just been about protecting his pride, he had also been trying to shield Linda from the full extent of their problems and the possibility that they might lose everything they had built together. His silence about the mortgage issues had created additional stress for Linda, who knew something was seriously wrong but lacked the information needed to understand or address the situation. Maya's intervention had provided more than just financial rescue. It had restored transparency and communication within the family about important issues that affected all of them. The mortgage restructuring gave Richard and Linda a sustainable path forward, but equally important was the establishment of regular family meetings where they could discuss challenges and opportunities openly, rather than allowing problems to fester in isolation. These family meetings became a forum for Maya to share insights from FinanceFlow's operations that were relevant to her parents' situation, while Richard and Linda contributed perspectives about long-term planning and wealth preservation that helped Maya think strategically about her own financial future. The collaboration created a sense of mutual support and shared responsibility that had been missing from their relationships for most of Maya's adult life. As FinanceFlow expanded into new markets throughout the fall, Maya found herself traveling frequently to meet with customers, investors, and potential partners in other cities. The business success that had once isolated her from family relationships now provided opportunities to include her parents in her professional activities in ways that were meaningful for all of them. Richard accompanied Maya on several business trips, contributing his expertise during client meetings and helping her navigate complex negotiations with potential partners. His experience with large-scale projects and his reputation in the business community opened doors that might have remained close to Maya despite her technical expertise and proven track record.
More importantly, these shared experiences allowed them to develop a working relationship based on mutual respect and complementary strengths, rather than the historical pattern of conflict and disappointment. Linda also became more involved in Maya's business activities, offering to help with administrative tasks and customer service during particularly busy periods. Her background in office management and her natural ability to connect with people made her surprisingly effective at handling customer inquiries and resolving service issues. Maya created a part-time consulting position for Linda that provided her with meaningful work while strengthening their personal relationship. The integration of family relationships with professional success represented a kind of healing that Maya hadn't anticipated when she first conceived the plan to purchase her father's mortgage. She had imagined that proving Richard wrong about her potential would provide satisfaction and perhaps force him to acknowledge his mistakes. But the actual outcome was more complex and ultimately more rewarding than simple vindication could have been. By winter, Maya's life had achieved a stability and fulfillment that would have seemed impossible during the darkest periods of her conflict with Richard. FinanceFlow was generating over $2 million in annual revenue and serving customers in 8 states, with expansion plans that would establish the company as a national presence within 2 years. The business success had created financial security that exceeded her most optimistic projections from her early startup days. But more importantly, it had provided a foundation for rebuilding family relationships that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding and resentment. The mortgage arrangement with her parents had evolved from a simple financial transaction into a partnership that benefited all of them in unexpected ways. Richard's monthly payments were easily manageable within his reduced income, and the equity position Maya had gained through purchasing the debt at a discount provided her with a valuable long-term investment. But the psychological benefits of their changed relationship proved to be even more significant than the financial advantages. Maya no longer carried the burden of trying to prove her worth to a father who seemed determined to find her lacking. Richard no longer felt the need to protect his family by discouraging his daughter from pursuing dreams that he feared would end in failure and disappointment. Instead, they had developed a collaborative partnership that leveraged their different strengths to create outcomes that exceeded what either of them could have achieved independently. Jake's role in this transformation had been crucial, both as a business partner who supported Maya's professional growth and as a friend who helped her navigate the emotional complexity of changing family dynamics. His perspective as someone outside the family system allowed him to offer objective advice about managing relationships while pursuing business objectives that sometimes created conflicting priorities. During one of their regular strategy meetings in December, Jake observed that Maya's success in rebuilding her relationship with Richard could serve as a model for other entrepreneurs who struggled with family expectations and support. "You've proven that it's possible to achieve professional success while also healing damaged relationships," he said. "That's actually a pretty rare combination. Most people either sacrifice family connections for career advancement or limit their professional ambitions to maintain family harmony." The observation made Maya consider whether her experience might be valuable to others facing similar challenges. FinanceFlow had always been focused on helping small business owners make better financial decisions, but Maya began to see opportunities to address the broader challenges that entrepreneurs faced when family relationships either supported or hindered their professional development. She started writing about the intersection of family dynamics and business success, sharing insights about how to navigate conflicting expectations while pursuing ambitious goals. The articles resonated with readers who had experienced their own versions of the conflict between family loyalty and individual achievement, and Maya discovered that her story offered hope to people who felt trapped between disappointing their families and abandoning their dreams. The writing also provided Maya with a new perspective on her own journey, helping her understand how the challenges she had faced were part of larger patterns that affected many families dealing with generational differences about success, risk, and achievement. Richard's criticism hadn't just been about her specific career choices. It had reflected his own anxiety about economic security and his desire to protect his daughter from experiencing the failures and setbacks that had shaped his own path to success. Understanding these deeper motivations didn't excuse the harm that Richard's behavior had caused, but it provided context that made forgiveness and reconciliation possible. Maya recognized that her father's mistakes had come from love and fear rather than malice or indifference, and that recognition allowed her to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of mutual understanding rather than simply demanding acknowledgement of past wrongs. As the new year approached, Maya reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since the previous winter, when she had first learned about her parents' financial crisis. 12 months earlier, she had been focused primarily on growing FinanceFlow while managing the isolation that came from family relationships defined by conflict and disappointment. Now, she was leading a thriving company while enjoying collaborative partnerships with both her parents that enhanced rather than hindered her professional success. The mortgage purchase had been the catalyst for these changes, but Maya understood that the transformation went much deeper than a single financial transaction. She had proven to herself that she could achieve the kind of success that her father had always claimed was beyond her capabilities, but more importantly, she had used that success to create positive outcomes for everyone involved, rather than seeking revenge against those who had doubted her potential. By winter, Maya's life had achieved a stability and fulfillment that would have seemed impossible during the darkest periods of her conflict with Richard. FinanceFlow was generating over $2 million in annual revenue and serving customers in 8 states, with expansion plans that would establish the company as a national presence within 2 years. The business success had created financial security that exceeded her most optimistic projections from her early startup days. But more importantly, it had provided a foundation for rebuilding family relationships that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding and resentment. The mortgage arrangement with her parents had evolved from a simple financial transaction into a partnership that benefited all of them in unexpected ways. Richard's monthly payments were easily manageable within his reduced income, and the equity position Maya had gained through purchasing the debt at a discount provided her with a valuable long-term investment. But the psychological benefits of their changed relationship proved to be even more significant than the financial advantages. Maya no longer carried the burden of trying to prove her worth to a father who seemed determined to find her lacking. Richard no longer felt the need to protect his family by discouraging his daughter from pursuing dreams that he feared would end in failure and disappointment. Instead, they had developed a collaborative partnership that leveraged their different strengths to create outcomes that exceeded what either of them could have achieved independently. Jake's role in this transformation had been crucial, both as a business partner who supported Maya's professional growth and as a friend who helped her navigate the emotional complexity of changing family dynamics. His perspective as someone outside the family system allowed him to offer objective advice about managing relationships while pursuing business objectives that sometimes created conflicting priorities. During one of their regular strategy meetings in December, Jake observed that Maya's success in rebuilding her relationship with Richard could serve as a model for other entrepreneurs who struggled with family expectations and support. "You've proven that it's possible to achieve professional success while also healing damaged relationships," he said. "That's actually a pretty rare combination."
Richard's acknowledgement of his mistakes had been important for healing their relationship, but Maya's decision to structure their new arrangement as a collaboration rather than a punishment had been equally crucial. Instead of using her power to humiliate her father or force him to grovel for forgiveness, she had created a partnership that allowed both of them to contribute their strengths while learning from their past errors. The approach had required Maya to set aside her desire for vindication in favor of pursuing outcomes that would benefit everyone long-term. That choice had been difficult at times, particularly when Richard occasionally reverted to old patterns of condescension or when Maya felt tempted to remind him of his previous predictions about her inevitable failure. But consistently choosing collaboration over confrontation had created a relationship dynamic that was sustainable and mutually beneficial rather than simply satisfying in the short term. Jake's partnership had been essential throughout this process, providing both the business expertise that allowed FinanceFlow to thrive and the personal support that helped Maya navigate complex emotional challenges. His belief in her capabilities during periods when she doubted herself had complemented Richard's eventual acknowledgement of her success, creating a support system that reinforced her confidence while challenging her to continue growing professionally and personally. On the last day of December, Maya stood in the conference room of FinanceFlow's expanded offices, looking out at the city where she had spent 6 years building both a successful company and a new understanding of what success actually meant. The view included the downtown high-rise where Richard's office was located, the neighborhood where she had rented her first studio apartment, and the hills beyond the city where her parents' house stood as a symbol of both past conflict and future collaboration. The symbolism wasn't lost on Maya. She had traveled from the cramped apartment where she first conceived FinanceFlow to offices that housed a team of 12 employees and served customers throughout the country.
She had transformed herself from a young woman seeking her father's approval to an entrepreneur who had earned his respect through demonstrable achievement. Most importantly, she had learned that the most meaningful victories weren't those that defeated others, but those that created opportunities for everyone to succeed. Richard called late that afternoon to invite Maya and Jake to a New Year's Eve dinner at the house, the first time Maya would be returning to her childhood home since purchasing the mortgage. The invitation carried symbolic weight that both of them recognized, representing Richard's acknowledgement that Maya belonged at the family table not as a dependent child, but as an equal partner in their ongoing relationships. The dinner itself was surprisingly relaxed, with conversation focusing on plans for the coming year rather than analysis of past conflicts or mistakes. Richard shared his optimism about the regional real estate market and his plans to pursue smaller, less leveraged development projects that would provide steady income without the risks that had led to his financial crisis. Linda talked about her enjoyment of her part-time work with FinanceFlow and her plans to expand her role in customer service operations. Maya described FinanceFlow's expansion plans and the opportunities she saw for building additional products that could serve the growing market of entrepreneurs and small business owners. The conversation was collaborative and forward-looking, focused on how each of them could contribute to shared goals rather than protecting individual interests or settling old scores. As the evening concluded and Maya prepared to leave the house where she had spent her childhood and teenage years, Richard walked with her to the front door. The hallway was lined with family photos that documented decades of holidays, graduations, and celebrations, including several pictures of Maya receiving academic awards and recognition for her early programming achievements. "I should have known then," Richard said, pausing in front of a photo from Maya's high school graduation. "You were always determined to succeed at whatever you put your mind to. I was so worried about protecting you from failure that I couldn't see your potential for achievement." Maya studied the photograph, remembering the mixture of pride and anxiety she had felt that day about her future prospects and her father's expectations for her life. The young woman in the photo had been ambitious and confident about her technical abilities, but uncertain about whether she could convert those skills into the kind of success that would earn her family's respect and support. "We both learned things we needed to know," Maya replied, putting her arm around her father's shoulders. "You learned to trust my judgment, and I learned that proving you wrong wasn't as important as finding ways for both of us to be right about what matters." The exchange summarized the transformation that had occurred in their relationship better than any formal analysis could have done. Maya had achieved the success she had always believed was possible, while Richard had discovered that his daughter's capabilities exceeded his most optimistic expectations. But more importantly, they had learned to use their different perspectives and expertise to create outcomes that benefited both of them, rather than viewing their relationship as a competition with winners and losers. As Maya drove home through the quiet streets of the city she had made her own, she considered the lessons that her experience might offer to others facing similar challenges. The desire to prove doubters wrong could be a powerful motivator for achieving difficult goals, but the most satisfying victories were those that created opportunities for everyone to succeed, rather than simply demonstrating superiority over those who had questioned your potential. Success, Maya had learned, wasn't just about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition for your accomplishments. It was about building relationships and creating value that extended beyond your individual achievements. The mortgage purchase had given her power over her father's situation, but using that power constructively created something more valuable than vindication, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals that would benefit both of them for years to come. Jake was waiting in their apartment with champagne and a business proposal that would launch FinanceFlow into national markets within the next 18 months. As they celebrated both personal and professional achievements, Maya reflected on how the decision to purchase her father's mortgage had led to outcomes she never could have anticipated when she first learned about his financial difficulties. She had set out to prove Richard wrong about her potential and capabilities, and she had succeeded beyond her most ambitious projections. But the process had also taught her that the most meaningful achievements were those that create positive outcomes for everyone involved, rather than simply demonstrating superiority over those who had questioned your potential. Success, Maya had learned, wasn't just about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition for your accomplishments. It was about building relationships and creating value that extended beyond your individual achievements. The mortgage purchase had given her power over her father's situation, but using that power constructively had created something more valuable than vindication, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals that would benefit both of them for years to come. Jake was waiting in their apartment with champagne and a business proposal that would launch FinanceFlow into national markets within the next 18 months. As they celebrated both personal and professional achievements, Maya reflected on how the decision to purchase her father's mortgage had led to outcomes she never could have anticipated when she first learned about his financial difficulties. She had set out to prove Richard wrong about her potential and capabilities, and she had succeeded beyond her most ambitious projections. But the process had also taught her that the most meaningful achievements were those that create positive outcomes for everyone involved, rather than simply defeating those who had questioned your potential. Success, Maya had learned, wasn't just about accumulating wealth or achieving recognition for your accomplishments. It was about building relationships and creating value that extended beyond your individual achievements. The mortgage purchase had given her power over her father's situation, but using that power constructively had created something more valuable than vindication, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals that would benefit both of them for years to come. Jake was waiting in their apartment with champagne and a business proposal that would launch FinanceFlow into national markets within the next 18 months. As they celebrated both personal and professional achievements, Maya reflected on how the decision to purchase her father's mortgage had led to outcomes she never could have anticipated when she first learned about his financial difficulties. She had set out to prove Richard wrong about her potential and capabilities, and she had succeeded beyond her most ambitious projections. But the process had also taught her that the most meaningful achievements were those that create positive outcomes for everyone involved, rather than simply defeating those who had questioned your potential. The young woman who had been told she would never own a house had not only achieved homeownership, but had used her success to ensure that her father could keep his home as well. The story wasn't just about vindication or revenge, it was about the power of perseverance, strategic thinking, and the choice to use success as a tool for building rather than destroying relationships. Maya had learned that the most satisfying victories weren't those that proved others wrong, but those that created opportunities for everyone to discover they had been wrong about what was possible when people worked together toward shared goals. As midnight approached and Maya looked toward the year ahead, she felt confident that the foundations she had built, both professionally and personally, would support whatever challenges and opportunities awaited. She had proven that Richard's predictions about her future were wrong, but more importantly, she had used that proof to create a future that was better for both of them than either could have achieved alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.